Um, all right. I'm ready to begin whenever you guys are. Any other judges have questions?
Actually, yes. Which bow team, like in terms of alpha, like your last names, is Gov?
Bow BL is Gov.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much.
All right. Are we good to go? Sweet. All right. Also, if I cut at any point, just feel free to interrupt me and say something along those lines. All right. Should hopefully be a fun round. I will begin my time in 3, 2, 1. Love is powerful and indeed rather beautiful, but we think that its beauty and power is greatest when it's given and offered, not when there is a degree of reciprocity guaranteed, but when it's not. I'm going to talk about two things in this speech. Firstly, I want to clarify exactly what this debate is about to hopefully avoid a messy debate, and then forward two arguments. Firstly, about the obligation to help other people. Secondly, why you get better relationships under our side. Before that, though, a brief note in terms of definitions. As a general note, what this statement, love sought is good, but given unsought is better, basically means is that loving someone, i.e. giving love to someone else, is as a general matter of principle good when someone else is seeking or craving or desiring or asking for that love, but it is even better to love someone and to give them your love and comfort and support when they are not seeking your love, when they're not asking for it. So given that general framing, what is this debate going to be about? We're going to define this house as an average individual and say what is in the best interest of that person, what can guarantee the best outcomes for themselves and the friends and the people they love. What is love? We're going to say that love is not necessarily romantic, but love is rather a particularly deep and strong emotion that connects you to the needs and to the well-beings of other people. To be clear, love is distinct from other types of emotions, so I can respect someone else without loving them. We think that love is a particularly strong type of emotion that bonds you rather closely to other people. And to be very clear, it's not just romantic. I can love my brother, but not necessarily have to live in Alabama at the same time. To be clear, then we're talking about three major types of love in this debate. The first is romantic love, so you have romantic partners and the love that you have for them. The second is familial love, so your parents, your siblings, your grandparents, etc., and the love you have for them. The final type of love is friendly love, so the love that you have for the friends that help you, the people that support you, and all of that. So what, given all of that, is this debate about? Our claim is going to be, it is better to give love when it is not being asked for by those three types of people, partners, family members, and friends, than when it is being asked for. So our claim, therefore, is a principal one. On both sides of this debate, we agree that giving love to someone when they are actively seeking that love out or asking for your love or asking for your support is good. You're going to comfort them, help them on both sides. The only thing that changes is that under our side, we're going to say that when people are not seeking your love, when they're turning you away, when they don't respond to your text, when they don't answer your calls, even in those instances, you should still extend your love to them. So that's the comparative in this debate. Our claim is that you should specifically extend love to people in those instances. Their side doesn't. Our claim is going to be that that type of love is better. One brief note of framing before I move into arguments. We think that seeking out love isn't always explicit. So it's not always that like I'll text Arnav and be like, hey, Arnav, do you love me? It's much more plausibly that you do it in subtle ways. So you, for example, like engage with them, you want to hang out with them, you want to talk with them, you actually want to see how their lives are going. And then, you know, in instances where you're suffering, say, hey, I'm going through really difficult parts of my life. We're going to say that in most instances, when you're not seeking love is when you're shutting yourself off, isolating yourself. Our claim is that you should still love them no matter what. Two arguments. Firstly, why does this help other people and why there's an affirmative obligation to do that? Second of all, on better relationships. Starting with the first, why do we think this helps people? I want to briefly characterize under what circumstances this motion is likely to be applicable. Because to be very clear, on both sides of the house, if you have a friend or a family member or someone in your life that actively seeks out love, whether that means they're actively talking to you or constantly texting with you or constantly seeing how your life is going, in those instances, we think that basically on both sides of the house, the outcomes are the same. You're going to love them, you're going to help them, you're going to support them when they're going through tough times and they're still seeking out your love, still seeking out your support. On both sides of the house, nothing really changes. Our claim is that the circumstances in which a friend, a family member, or a romantic partner is not seeking out your love is probably an indication that they're going through a really difficult portion, a really difficult time in their life. That's for 3 reasons. The first is that people are oftentimes deeply uncomfortable and even embarrassed at the idea of seeking out love in the lowest parts of their life. Because when people have been embarrassed, when they've been scolded by their parents, when they've been thrown out on the streets, that's oftentimes the most difficult parts of your life to actively text someone, to call someone, to talk to someone, because you feel ashamed, you feel embarrassed, you don't want to interact with other people. So those are the most likely situations where you shut down, is at the lowest parts of your life. The second reason is because when people go through these difficult parts of their life, it is internally cyclically devastating. What does that mean? It means that when you are told by other people that you are not worthy of being loved, when you're cast out on the streets by your parents for being gay, when you are put in a difficult position in life, very many people internalize that and blame themselves. They feel as if they are not entitled to love, that they are not deserving of love. And it is, of course, distressing that people feel that, but that doesn't mean that people do not feel that. That means that when people are going through difficult times and they don't feel like they deserve love, they don't seek out love. So when they're going through difficult times, no thank you, they don't actively seek out help from other people. They don't call their friend and say, hey, I'm going through a really difficult moment in your life, because they don't feel like they're even worth your time. But the third and final reason is that people tend to seek out or reach out for love, i.e. seek contact, on average, when they're doing pretty well. In 95% of instances, you're going to try to seek out love from other people when you're doing okay, because it reinforces the pre-existing positivity of your life. So given all of that context, what does this mean? We think that when people are not seeking out love, which, to be clear, you still give love under our side, those are situations where people are going through really, really difficult parts of their life. Why then is it better to give love in these instances than to give love when someone's asking for it? 2 reasons. Firstly, the magnitude of impact is just much greater, because when I'm doing pretty great and text Robert and say, hey, let's talk or whatever, the magnitude of impact of Robert loving me back and giving me comfort and support just isn't that great. Yeah, it's nice, but it isn't as big as when someone is potentially on the brink of committing suicide and you call them and say, I want to help you. I want to extend my support and my love and my care and affection for you. But second of all, we think that helping people in the hardest moments of their life will always be the most meaningful for you. The benefit that you receive of knowing that you potentially saved someone's life is enormous. Knowing that you helped someone when they were asking for love is cool, but knowing that you're such a good person that you're actively helping someone when they weren't asking for love gives you an enormous internal emotional boost, because you feel like a good human being for doing all the great things that you do. So what is the end impact of this argument? Firstly, your own quality of life improves when you actively extend love to people that aren't seeking love, but the quality of life of the friends, the family members, the romantic partners that you love also increases when they aren't responding to you, when they're locking themselves away. Second argument, why do you get better relationships under our side? 3 reasons. Firstly, we think that you just develop a much better reputation as a person under our side if you are known as the person who will love the friends that have turned away from you and are not answering your calls because they've locked themselves in the room and haven't come out in 7 days. You develop a good reputation as the sort of person who wants to help that person. What is the impact of this? Firstly, more people are likely to want to be friends with you and have a good, productive relationship with you because they can trust you, because they know that you've helped other people and are therefore likely to help them. But also, the quality of friendship gets a lot higher, insofar as now other people know that you are the person who has the reputation for being the sort of person that helped people, not just when they texted you consistently for 7 days, but rather when they weren't doing that. The second reason you get better relationships under our side is that other people reciprocate your actions. Because oftentimes when you help someone out in the darkest moments of their life, what do they do in response 5 weeks down the road? They help you out when you're also going through difficult moments of your life, when you're not seeking out love from them. This is crucially important. Other people are going to love you, probably on both sides of the house, but the magnitude of love that other people give to you is much greater under our side of the house when you've helped them out in the darkest moments of their life. People recognize how difficult and how hard it is for you to make that phone call when someone hasn't been picking up for the past 3 months. So under our side of the house, people treat you better, which means your quality of life goes up. But finally, you develop a better ability to pick up and identify potential red flags under our side of the house when you know when your quality of life is going down. At the end of this speech, we get a better quality of relationship. We help the most vulnerable people. Very proud to propose.
All right, 8.5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to make some observations about framing of what the resolution means, and then I'm going to respond to PMC arguments and then provide our case. Is everyone ready? Okay, I'll start now. I think the government makes a big strategic error when they don't talk about like half the resolution, right? This resolution isn't just about love that this house is providing, it's also about love that this house is receiving. And it's also about, for you as a person, would you prefer receiving love that is sought or love that is unsought? We tell you we as a person would prefer receiving love that we want, right? than love that we don't want and that people are offering up to us for no reason. We think also in the situation when you are giving love, it's more important to give love to people who want it than people who don't want it. Let me then talk about some mischaracterization. Ryan comes up here and tells you that people who like are feeling bad and feel like they don't deserve love don't want love. I don't think that's true. Just because people feel down doesn't mean that they don't want to love. I think if anything, people who have depression do want love. I think if anything, those types of people that Ryan is saying he helps actually are on the other side of the house. The people in the worst situations are the people who want to love the most. Just because they have trouble expressing it does not mean that they aren't seeking love. Because what Ryan is trying to tell you is that the depressed person doesn't want love and that they're not seeking it out. I tell you that they are trying to get love, but they have a hard time basically being able to show that they want love. And that's why we still think in the opposition world, we are actually the side who's giving it to people who are seeking it out. And we're actually claiming all of those benefits. I think you can turn a lot of Ryan's argumentation about these people who are isolating themselves, even though they want love, to our side of the house at the point that we know that those two people do want love. And actually the critical warrant for Ryan's like impacting in that resolution, in that scenario, is that these people want love and that love helps them. So the whole point is that for these people who are isolating themselves from the world, maybe because they went through some like bad situation with their lives, we contend that those people do want love. And in that scenario, that's actually on side opposition in the house, right? Because we're saying that love to people who want it, who are seeking love is the type of love we care about. So I think if anything, you're going to credit that to side opposition. Then let's talk about the other half of people like that Ryan sort of just ignores, right? There are people who are icing you out who just don't want to deal with you, right? And so then the thing is, Ryan is telling you that we should seek out those people. I'd say no, right? If there are people who don't want to deal with you, you don't want to keep on trying to push your love onto them because you come off as someone who's needy and annoying. And if anything, right, these social implications of that are like pretty bad at the point where like now they're going to tell everyone like, oh, look, like this person just like keeps on trying to hang out with me, even though I've made it pretty clear I don't want to talk to them. And I think those people that we're talking about who actually don't want love, those people, right, are actually going to harm you if you try to give them love. And also it's a waste of time, right? At the point where like they just aren't receiving the love. But we also think this results in you becoming dependent on the love of others that don't need you, because in trying to give them love, you also want some love back from them, right? That's like part of like the idea of giving love. And so what ends up happening in those scenarios is you're expecting love from people who don't want to even interact with you or don't want to engage in good time with you. And so what that leaves you with is a feeling of emptiness at the point that these people who don't want love also aren't giving you love back. You feel like your love is sort of, it's meaningless, and you feel pretty bad about that. So I think that also harms your mental health, but also your image and also people's view of you as a person. Okay, so now let's talk about like the other half of the debate that Ryan just like ignores, and I think like gives side opposition a lot of offense, right? It's this half about the type of love you want for yourself. We tell you the type of love you want for yourself in the context of like, do you want to seek out love, or do you want sort of like love that sort of happens, like love at first sight, the love that you aren't seeking out, that you just happen upon? We tell you that you actually want love that you seek out for a couple of reasons. We tell you that love sought in the context of love for you is more powerful than love unsought. What this means is that generally love unsought is fleeting. Stuff like love at first sight, that like the love that you aren't looking for but you happen upon, is usually based on like really like surface level things, like maybe like, oh, you both just think each other are attractive, or maybe you both just have like this one hobby that you met each other at and you think like it's cool that you share this one hobby. You don't spend that much time building these connections, and what that results in is a weaker love that's not going to last a long time. Yeah, I'll take Gaurav's POI.
Yeah, so like how does sharing one common interest, for example, like automatically lead to love?
So we're talking about like stuff at love at first sight. Let's say you go to a debate competition, you just see this person, you guys both are just like, wow, this person's so hot, I need to date them, right? That's the type of love that's love unsought. You just like see someone, you both just are just like, dang, this person's really hot, right? And then you guys like go out on a date. We think like those type of relationships are pretty weak, right? And don't lead to long-term stable relationships. That's what love unsought looks like in the context of you receiving love. And so then we tell you that those type of relationships aren't long-term. And we think that on the comparative, love sought is better, because then you're looking for relationships with people, and that usually looks like you starting out and like befriending them and trying to create like sort of like basically shared emotional attraction, and also just like looking for like emotional compatibility with the person before trying to start like love with them. And so those type of relationships, when you're like seeking out love with someone, are probably going to be a lot stronger because you put more time into building that love. And so we tell you that long-term love is probably better for your life as a whole. But then we tell you love in a form not sought is less impactful. This is in the context of the type of love you receive and give while you're now in a relationship. We tell you that like love comes in a lot of forms. For example, like friendship, romance. But we tell you that like when you're looking for love, you want a certain type of interaction. Let's say you're like a tactile lover. You like being touched, right? If someone just starts giving you gifts, right? Because that's like, even though you're telling them like, look, I like being touched, like that's the type of love I like to receive. What ends up happening is those gifts don't give you a lot of value, right? Because you don't really value those gifts at a high level. But on the comparative, if you see receive the type of love that you want, that you are seeking out, right? If someone touches you, like it gives you hugs and stuff, like we'd probably say you derive a lot more utility out of that type of love than the love that you don't really engage with, that you don't really prefer. So in the end, we tell you like in that context, because I think there's a lot of context when we think about love. In that context, love sought is a lot more powerful because it fulfills your basic desires for love a lot better. So then we're telling you in that situation, you probably are going to get more out of the love than those for side government. So then what we tell you is now some of our basically our substantive arguments in the context of Ryan's case. We tell you that giving love when it's unsought leads you to basically relationships that are built sort of off just you and not the other person, right? Because basically what Ryan says we need to do is that like, oh, look, there's someone who doesn't like us, who doesn't want to talk to us, we should just badger them with love. And so like, yeah, you're going to end up with some sort of relationship, but it's going to end up being a one-sided relationship where you're the one providing all of the love there. We think those type of relationships like are really detrimental because then you sort of have to take the brunt of all the emotional damage of that relationship. And then so what ends up happening is when that person just gets bored of you or just gets annoyed with you because you keep on badgering them, they're sort of going to drop you and leave you. But then what ends up happening there is you've invested so much like basically love into this relationship for someone who like doesn't even want it. And so you feel that sense of loss that harms your emotional psyche on the long term. So I think like Ryan needs to sort of, Gaurov in his next speech needs to engage with sort of the other side of like this argument about people who actually don't want your love, because what they just do is conveniently ignore the majority of cases where people like actually don't want your love. And then they try to co-opt like our case into their own case by saying like, oh, well, there are these people who like have trouble showing that they want love, even though they actually do want love, but we provide love to them. And I don't really think that fits under their side of the house. I want that to be really clear, because in the end, those people who are in tough emotional situations, they want love. And so our side is the one that's saying giving love to people who they want is better, not worse. And I think that's why you put those scenarios on the world of side opposition, and therefore any benefits derived from helping people out who are in a tough time, who need love, sort of go to us. And so that's why I'm so proud to oppose.
All right, can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I guess quick like off time roadmap, if everyone's good with that. I guess I'll just do some observations, then probably go into op case, then go into gov case. So if everyone is ready, I will start time now. Okay, so a few quick things at the top of my speech, which will become important later on. One distinct observation that needs to be said here. There is a distinction between wanting something and seeking something, right? Like I could want ice cream, but not explicitly go ask my mom for ice cream. I think that's going to become very important as this case goes on. Secondly, let's talk about ops like argument here that Gov mischaracterizes the motion or like mischaracterizes our strategy in the sense that like we're not talking about like the love that you will receive. Like they're saying that people don't want unsought love, right? Like we find this to be like relatively untrue, but we will address this later on in the case as well. Okay. Now let's go into ops case, right? Like I think ops starts by kind of refuting Gov's case by saying like people who have depression do want love and do seek love. Right? Like Ryan gives you good structural analysis here. He tells you that like let's say you're cast out onto the streets by your parents for being gay, right? Like you might not feel entitled to love. You might blame yourself. At this point, you do not go out and seek love because you don't feel worthy of seeking love. Yes, it is true you might want love. Obviously, everyone wants to be loved, right? Like I don't think that's like a real point of comparison here, right? Like you probably want to be loved. You probably want someone to extend their hand to you and say that no, everything is okay. You are worthy of love and you are worthy of life. And you don't even have the courage to go and ask for love. At that point, when someone extends you love, we believe that is the strongest form of love. That is the best form of love because that person is at their lowest point. And when you extend them love, it has the biggest magnitude of impact. Okay. Next, let's go into this idea of like people might be intentionally ignoring you, right? Like, so like if you try to show them love in some form, you're like badgering them and they might get like annoyed and shut you off, right? Like this is like completely like it's a gross over exaggeration of what actually happens, right? Like if I text Arnav right now, I'm like, hey, are you okay? He's not gonna go block me on all social media platforms and never talk to me again, right? Like there's a way of reaching out without being like super needy and annoying. I think that op completely misses that. I think you can give this to Gov, right? Like no one's gonna be mad if you haven't talked. No one's gonna be mad if you haven't talked to someone for a while and then they reach out and they ask you if you're okay, right? Like I think that that's fair. I think that you can do that without being needy and annoying. If they say that they don't want to talk to you anymore, then you as a human being probably have like the foresight and the conscience not to reach out anymore. But that being said, I think that if someone hasn't talked to you for a while, for example, let's say my mom hasn't communicated with me for 3 months, I can probably tell that something might be wrong and I can reach out and I can possibly make a great impact on her life by helping her out in some way or mechanism. Okay, the next point that Op brings out is that it's a waste of time. I think that you can counter this idea that it's a waste of time to reach out to someone and show them love, because like the impacts that Ryan gives you about the effects of reaching out and showing someone love, right? Like if my mom hasn't reached out to me for 3 months, if Arnav hasn't reached out for me in 3 months, like for all I know, Arnav could be suicidal. Like if I reach out to Arnav at this point and I offer him a hand and I help him out, I could be saving his life. Like to that point, it's not really a waste of time to save someone's life. I think that Gov runs that case, and I think that Gov can win on that point. Okay. The next point you get out of op is that we become dependent on the love of others, right? Like, I don't necessarily think you become dependent on the love for others. I think all humans are mutually dependent on other humans, right? Like to an extent, all humans need other humans for survival, whether that be social interaction or love or caring for each other. So like if a human, for example, is like close to being suicidal, then they are intrinsically dependent on someone else. Like, I don't think this is such a bad thing if a human is dependent on someone else's love. Like they are clearly dependent on your love. So you might as well go out and give them that love. If they are dependent on your love and you give them that love and they survive, that is a major benefit that flows for the government. Okay. Let's also talk about this other point that comes out of opposition, which is like kind of confusing. This idea of like unsought love leading to shallow relationships. And the idea that like, okay, like I'm at a debate tournament, but I'm not like seeking love, but I find someone and I'm like, oh, you're super hot. Let's go out on a date. And like, there we go. We're like getting married. Like, I don't think that's necessarily the way it works once again, right? Like, I think it's important to realize that love has like a pretty high bar, right? Like, I do think like many people are attractive, but I don't necessarily love all of them. That would be kind of weird, right? So like, as far as that is concerned, I think that like, unsought love like has a pretty high bar. Like you don't meet someone, think they're hot, and then fall in love. But on the other hand, like if you do fall in love with someone after meeting them, and this is like one of those love and first sight things, like I don't think it's necessarily bad. Like if I'm not trying to look for love and I find love, like sign me up. Like where do I go for that? Like I think that's perfectly fine. I'd rather find love than have to go look on like a dating website for 10 years until I find someone. I don't see much of a problem with that. Flow that for government. Okay. Next, let's talk about like the idea that love comes in a lot of forms, right? So Arnav brings up this point about like tactile loving and the idea that like some people want to be loved by touching. And like if you give them gifts, they're probably not going to want it or be annoyed. Like first point of response, right? Like if someone is like someone likes to be loved by touching and you give them like gifts, like, okay, I don't think they're gonna be so mad. Like, I don't think that's a big deal. Like if I like to be touched, but you give me like tickets to a Coldplay concert, I'm not gonna be upset at you. Okay, but the second point here is that like I think we can like go into Arnav's case a little bit deeper and be like, okay, like let's say someone like likes to be loved by touching, but they're not asking you to touch you at that very point, and you still touch them. That probably is going to make a bigger impact on their lives or like on their happiness at that very moment, because they're going to be like, oh wait, I didn't even ask to be touched, but this person had like the consideration to think of like what I desire and what I like, and they decided to do that. I think that's a major benefit. It increases your happiness like more than if you asked for it. Therefore, I think that flows also for the opposition. Okay. The next point I think that comes up once again in the opposition case. So I think that flows for government. Oops. I think the next point that comes up in their opposition case is this idea that like you take on a toll of being like the person who like take on the emotional toll, right? Like the idea that you're always the one giving the love and you never receive the love back. Like I think that's kind of false. Like in the sense that like if you keep complimenting someone or you keep giving them what they want, like it's human tendency to like return the favor and probably love the person back. Like you're not just going to, if you feel loved and you feel happy, like you probably are going to have the motivation and like the organic incentive to like pass that on and love the person who is loving you. I think that's a fair and reasonable assumption to like take. So So given that, let's now return back to the government case and discuss like some refutations made against it and start to maybe like try to weigh this a little bit. So the first like main point that we get, I think, like out of the Gov case here is that we're like helping other people when they need it the most, right? Like I think that like the crucial like distinction here is like we help people when they say they want it, right? Like we will give people love when they say they want it, and that's all good and well. But when someone isn't asking for it and they desperately need it, I think it is more important to give them that love because they are in a lower point than the person who's actually asking for it. That is a crucial point in this debate. Like if I'm asking for love, I still have the courage to do so. If I'm not asking for love or help and I'm at such a low point, like that means when I help that person out, they're going to benefit it from like in terms of like a greater magnitude. They're going to reflect on that and be like, oh wow, I didn't even ask for that, but this person still had the consideration to think of me and like still help me out when I needed it the most. That kind of love is better. That kind of love you have a lasting, you keep thinking about, and you want, and as a result of you thinking about how they helped you when you needed it the most and didn't ask for it, as a result, you will go out and help other people, and that obviously creates a better society. Okay. The second idea that I think government fronts in PM is this idea of like better relationships, right? Like you obviously develop a better reputation if everyone knows you're the person who's like trying to help and support people. I think like the only offense against this that you get out of op is that like you might think that that person is annoying and badgering, but like, I don't think like most humans like will naturally think that people who reach out are annoying and badgering. Like sure, if you're like, oh, can I go to the movies with you like 15 times in a minute, like maybe, but like the probability of that is like pretty low. I think someone who reaches out like once a month if they haven't heard from you is like, dude, are you okay? Like is the pandemic hitting you pretty bad? Like I don't think that person's really annoying. You're probably gonna be like, oh my god, this person's so nice. So as far as that is concerned, I'm so proud to propose.
All right, just a quick off-time roadmap. I'm going to be talking about one major observation, then talking about gov case, then op case. All right, if everybody is ready, I will begin my time now. Judges, there's one major reason that most of government's case doesn't make sense here, and it's because of a mischaracterization of the resolution. I'd like to read you the resolution one more time. This House believes that love sought is good, but given unsought is better. Now, I don't know why, but for some reason, government has characterized this debate as if it's about is one bad, is one good, do we do one, do we do the other? The reality is this debate recognizes that both are good. Look at the motion. The motion recognizes that one is good, but just says that the other is better. Neither side here is arguing that one is bad or one is good. So when all of the refutations to our entire case from the government's second speaker is essentially saying like, it's not that bad, like it's not that bad, or the things that we do when it's unsought aren't that bad, people don't think it's that annoying, all of those refutations simply don't make sense when you look at what they're supposed to be arguing under the resolution. Again, on opposition, we're not saying that love unsought is like this awful, terrible thing that nobody's ever going to like. And we're not saying that everyone's going to want to murder you immediately if you text them once and they're not expecting it. What we are saying is that it's not necessarily better than love sought. That's what the resolution is about. Don't let government simply change the debate because it serves their side better. All right, with that being said, let's move into government case. Essentially, their first contention about helping people rests upon another mischaracterization of what seeking love is. First off, as Arnav talked about, we've been going back and forth this entire debate. We don't necessarily accept this idea that the people who aren't necessarily always actively like asking you for it aren't seeking out love. We think most people might still be seeking love in some ways if you're friends with them enough that you would reach out when they're depressed or suicidal. But again, just because Ryan tells you that those who are suicidal, those who are cast out from society don't reach out to people, doesn't mean there aren't also just as many in that same group that do reach out to people. They are not a monolith of which we can just predict simply because Ryan gives us warranting. In the same way that Ryan tells you those who are cast out, those who are in bad mental situations don't feel deserving of love, there are lots who, even if they don't feel deserving of love, seek it out because it is their only way of comfort. I think realistically, this kind of cancels out. So you don't really gain anything on either side of this, right? Either you accept that it's sought love and you just get all those benefits on the op side, or like it just equals out to both. Some of it's unsought, some of it's sought. You don't really get a benefit from that on either side. But let's look at what actually is unsought love, because unlike what the government would like you to believe, unreciprocated love doesn't necessarily mean unsought love. Let's look at what is actually unsought love. The majority of situations in which that love is unsought, that connection is unsought, as government defines it, it's friendship, familial, romantic. That is where people simply don't want it from you. Let's look at this example that Ryan brings up in this contention, where he talks about how if he reached out to me and talked to me when he was happy about debate, it would be great, but it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But like if I reached out to him and he was depressed, it would mean more. Let's look at the reality. Let's say that I reach out to Arnav, or I reach out to Ryan to talk about debate, and he simply doesn't want to talk about it. He's going to be annoyed if I continue to badger him. And again, if government wants us to believe that this unsought love is better, they would want these people to continue to give that unsought love, which means that even when it's not reciprocated, again, Ryan tells you that when it's not reciprocated is when you should keep giving it, which means in this situation, I would text Ryan, he would not want a response, he would make that clear, and I would continue to badger him. I think at a minimum, this would be annoying, and at a maximum could actually hurt our relationship, which I would want to still exist even if in the moment that love is unsought. So again, I'm not saying that just because I'm annoying Ryan a little bit here, he's never going to talk to me again. But that's not what the resolution is about. I'm simply arguing that that unsought love is not as good as the love that is sought. Because when I reach out to Ryan, because he wants love from me, he wants that connection, that's better for both of us than when I reach out to Ryan and he simply doesn't want it. Because I don't put on that burden of trying to perform to somebody and perform for somebody that doesn't even want to talk to me. And Ryan actually gains the benefit of gaining love from somebody that he wants. He's seeking out that love. I think that's pretty obvious. That's what the debate is actually about. Not about mental health, where it can go realistically to both sides. Some people will reach out and seek it, some people won't. All right. With that being said, let's move on to their second contention about bettering relationships. I think this is the weaker of the two because, again, it kind of just relies on you accepting the first contention. They essentially tell you here that, like, if you're known as somebody who reaches out to people with, like, mental health problems, that you're going to be seen as a better person. Again, I tell you that you can characterize those people, some of them under sought love, some of them under unsought, so it's kind of just a wash, but your reputation is actually bad because if you're known as the person that will continually badger somebody who doesn't want to talk to you simply because you hold some greater moral belief that unsought love is better and so you should continue to give unsought love, your reputation will be as somebody that nobody wants to become friends with because they know the second they become friends with you, you will take literally every opportunity when they tell you they don't want to talk to you to continue to badger them. I don't think that's the good reputation that's going to build better relationships, even if government wants you to believe that it is. Again, we tell you that one-sided relationships are bad, and not only for the person who doesn't want the love, but again, the other side of the debate that isn't really addressed, for the person giving that love, because a one-sided relationship means you are putting in more than you are getting out. You are actively being told by the other person they don't want to talk to you. That's just an overall harm on mental health. All right. Let's move on to their responses to our case, which essentially all goes away, again, once you read the resolution. In response to our first contention about love sought and being more long-term than love unsought. First, government tells you that love has a high bar. We think that's not really true. We think that the topic, or like the idea of love at first sight does exist. We think that that's one of the reasons you have such high divorce rates, right? A lot of people think they are in love or are in love at first sight, or without really realizing some of the deeper lack of connection in the relationships. And that's why a lot of relationships don't work out. That's why most people don't end up getting married. But we think when that love is sought, when it's based off of a connection you build with somebody, off of a lot of mutual interest and off of a mutual compatibility, that's what we believe love sought is, something you're looking for and spending time pursuing. That's when you have actual good long-term relationships. Then government tells you that love at first sight isn't that bad. Again, we are not telling you love at first sight isn't, we're not telling you it's the worst thing in the entire world. All we're saying is it is not better than love that is sought. So when Gaurov's response to this argument is essentially love at first sight still isn't that bad, we're telling you on a comparative, it is worse. That's what the resolution is about. In response to our second contention about the types of love, essentially Gaurov gives you the exact same response he gives you the first one. He says, even if I want affection, even if I want affection through, let's say, touch, and you give me gifts, I'm not going to be mad at you. Again, obviously you're not going to be mad at somebody giving you gifts, but it's not as impactful. We are evaluating a world in which most likely you will get both sought love and unsought love. What we want to know is which one is better. And when government tells you that the unsought love isn't that bad, obviously it's not that bad, but we're telling you it's worse than the sought love. Those gifts will not impact you as much as touch will from the partner because you have a reason for wanting touch. You have a preference because that's what means more to you. That's what impacts you more. And so obviously you're not mad at the gifts, but it simply isn't as important in the long term of your relationship, in the long term of your happiness, and in the long term of what you actually get from your love, from your interactions with other people. Again, I think the most important problem with government's case here is that it rests upon two mischaracterizations. The first one is this basic idea that everyone who suffers from mental health problems or who needs the love the most is never going to reach out. We think that's just not true. We think that most likely it's a wash and it goes to both sides, but realistically, the people that are in those situations are the ones seeking out love. They need it the most and they are actively seeking it from whoever they can, so you're most likely to interact with that. And the other major misconception here is just a mischaracterization of the resolution. When all of the responses to our points from Gov's case are essentially, I mean, this unsought love is not that bad, just read the resolution. We're not saying it's awful. We're just saying it's worse. And if they can't realistically prove that this unsought love is better than sought love, they simply lose the debate there. That's why I'm incredibly proud to oppose.
Okay. So I'm gonna weigh under 2 voters. Okay. So I'm ready. All right. Let's start now. Okay, so when we under 2 voters, the one that like side Gov sort of forgot about, the one about love you receive, and then the one about love you give. Okay, so let's talk about love you receive, right? I think like Robert basically explains this. They don't actually ever prove that in the context of love you receive, love unsought is better than love sought. They at best say that like love unsought isn't that bad in terms of love you receive, but they actually basically concede that argument, right? That like that love you seek in the context of love that you're receiving yourself is better because like of all the arguments we tell you, right? Stronger relationships, long-term relationships, you actually have a better emotional connection. I think the reason you first of all weigh love you receive over love you give is because love you receive like directly impacts your happiness, right? At the point that you're this individual is thinking about love in the context of yourself, right? In the end, in the context of love you receive, you probably value that more because that's love that directly benefits you. And because we win on this impact pretty cleanly because they don't really give any responses, I think you just flow the round to side opposition. But then let's talk about love you give, right? And I'm going to tell you why they don't even win on that. But like, again, even if they do, I tell you that love you receive outweighs. But in the context of love you give, we have like a couple people we need to talk about. I think we talk about the people with mental health issues. I think like Robert is right at the point that like there are some of these people with mental health issues who are seeking love. And so we can co-opt all the benefits. And then there's some people who aren't like actively seeking love, who Ryan tries to say they co-opt onto side government. But then I tell you, right, in my LOC, that even the people who aren't like looking like they're seeking love, they still want love, they're still trying to get love, but the thing is they're just having a trouble like showing that they're seeking love. You can actually probably take a lot of these benefits of that second group and still probably credit it to side opposition at the point that when that Ryan's mindset when he talks about this argument is not that like, oh, these people don't want love, but we should still give it to them. It's like these people want love, but they're just having a hard time trying to show that they want love. But in that case, your mindset is giving sought love. It's not giving unsought love. You're just trying to figure out who seeks love through some intuition. But so at that point, like you can actually just give 100% of the people with mental health problems to our side. You can vote for us there. But if you don't buy that 100% of the people who have mental health problems go to our side, then like it's sort of like 50-50. We don't get any like real good quantification of like how that split goes. I think that's sort of a wash. But then we can go on to talking about other types of people who you're giving love to, right? The type of people who want it, who you will always gain utility out of because those people just want love, and that's on our side of the house. But then in their house, there are people that just don't want to spend time with you that you are trying to give love to. We give you like a bunch of reasons about why this is harmful, not just to you, but to them too, and then also to your public like image, and like they don't really engage with it, right? They're like, it's not that bad if you badger people. But then note Robert's analysis. It's not about whether it's not that bad if you badger people with love. It's about, is that better than giving love to the people who want it, right? And then when you make that comparative there, I think it's quite clear that for them, when you're talking about like your average friends, it's probably a lot better to give love to people who want it, so you can strengthen those relationships instead of giving love to people who don't want it, right? So you can actually harm those relationships, but also waste love on people who don't want it, right? And invest in people who don't want your love, because we think that's probably harmful for you as a person. But then we tell you that the reason the love you give is outweighed by the love you receive, right? Is that in the end, the love you give has a sort of like nebulous way of giving you impact, right? There's like, well, if you give love, Ryan says like, if you give love, then like, oh, then you like feel good about like the love you give. And so you get some utility out of giving love. But then the thing is like the love you receive directly credits you that utility. And also when you give love, right, and then you get like backlash, let's say from people who don't want that love, I don't even think Ryan's argument holds true. You probably actually feel bad about giving love, and you also get like a net harm in terms of like the happiness you get out of the love you give. So like not even all the love you give actually benefits you. So basically the weighing you get is like, first of all, love you receive outweighs love you give, so you can vote for us there. Then in terms of mental health, there's a good chance you just buy that like all of them actually do want love and they're all seeking love, just some of them are having trouble seeking love. In that case, you can just vote for us on the mental health issue. But then if you think mental health is a wash, you can just vote for us on the fact that like, we aren't annoying people who don't want love, but we are giving love to others who want our love. And so then you can vote for us there too. So I think like the three spots on the flow where you can vote for side opposition. So proud to oppose.
Give me a second to set up my flow. All right, brief off-time roadmap. I'll give you my roadmap on time. I'll start my time in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to talk about, broadly speaking, two things in this speech. Firstly, some extraneous responses that we hear from Robert. Secondly, 2 points of collapse in this debate. Before that, though, I want to address one thing. Arnav and Robert both say in op block that we don't prove that one type of love is better than the other. I don't want to be that guy, but I gave you a bunch of specific warrants in PMC as to why this particular type of love is better than the other. More on that later. 3 extraneous arguments I briefly want to deal with that come from Robert's speech. The first argument is Robert says that we mischaracterized this debate because we said that one type of love is bad and the other is good. Firstly, this is not in tension with the motion. We can prove that one is comparatively better than the other by showing that one type of love is not that perfect. But secondly, yeah, Robert's right. We're talking about which one of these is better. Our claim is just that one is better than the other. It's not that important. Again, weighing on that later. Secondly, Robert says that under our side, you're going to develop a reputation of badgering people when you do this a bunch. But I think you need to also weigh this, right? I told you in PMC, that if you potentially save someone from taking their own life, you're also going to gain a reputation when that person goes around and tells everyone else, this person seeked out and helped me and gave me comfort and support in my darkest moments. So at worst, this is a wash. At best, you actually get a good reputation. Finally, Robert says that love at first sight is bad. I think you need to do some weighing here. There are 3 types of love: familial, romantic, friendly love. Of those 3, only romantic love pertains to this argument. Of romantic love, only like 2% of people are ever going to fall into love at first sight. Do the weighing here. It's not that important. 2 points of collapse. Oh, sure, yeah.
All of this analysis about like love that you receive is new, and Gaurav probably should have given it.
Wait, sorry, what specific analysis though?
Like all the things you just said about like, oh, like in the context, like people you love, like that's only romantic, and then like all this 2% stuff, like that's like new, and those are like arguments about why this isn't important. That's not really winning. I think Gaurav should have given it.
But Gaurav said that most people don't fall into love at first sight. He made a joke about it too. That's what I remember it from. He had said that realistically speaking, most people don't fall into love at first sight in response to, I forget which argument, but it was in Gaurav's speech.
We'll take it into account on the flow. Thank you.
Great. I'll continue along. First point of voter issue in this debate is about helping other people. Secondly, what side best benefits your own self-interest. Let's start on the issue of helping other people. I briefly want to deal with what Robert says, which is Robert says that, well, some people that are struggling with depression will reach out, and some people that are struggling with depression won't reach out. Yes, there are some people who try jumping in front of a speeding train and live, and some people who do the same thing and die. That doesn't mean that the numbers of people are the same. The fact that some people who are struggling won't reach out or do reach out doesn't mean that there isn't a much larger group of people out there who don't reach out. So you need to do some weighing here on what is more likely. Is it more likely that a person going through difficult times in their life will not reach out? Is it more likely that they will reach out? We give you 3 structural reasons that by my count aren't ever responded to as to why you're more likely struggling with depression, struggling with COVID pandemic, etc., to not reach out. Firstly, we talk about the fact that you just feel bad about yourself. You feel embarrassed. You self-blame. Secondly, you don't feel like you're deserving of love. You don't want to make the phone call because you feel like you're burdening other people, which is why you don't reach out. But finally, on average, the people that do reach out are in a relatively good position in life. So do the weighing here. Realistically, under our side of the house, the people that you're giving love to are people that desperately need that love. Not even because they're depressed or suicidal, but because they're really, really suffering. And the fact that there's a small group of people, 5% of people who are struggling and will reach out is unimportant. Why? Do the weighing. On both sides of the house, you're going to help the people that reach out, as both Robert and Arnav concede. But on our side, you specifically help the people who don't reach out. So do the weighing here on magnitude. Even if you don't buy the weighing on probability, we help all people that are suffering because we help the people that reach out and we help the people that do not reach out. So do the weighing here on magnitude. Robert says that you're now going to be seen as badgering other people. This is going to harm your relationships. But I think that somewhat trivially, someone taking their own life, someone cutting off all contact entirely with you is much worse for you, the quality of relationship. So do the weighing here. What is more important? Is it more important that you badger someone by sending them a bunch of DMs on Instagram, or is it more important to save someone from suicide? I think the weighing here on magnitude is pretty intuitive. But even if you don't buy that, what you have to buy is all the framing I gave you from PMC as to why, realistically speaking, the negative impacts of badgering someone just aren't that big. Because as Gaurov points out, worst case, some guy responds by saying, I don't want to talk with you. That's the end of it. The best case is you help someone who's suffering. I think the weighing here is pretty intuitive. Second point of collapse, what benefits your own self-interest? There are two scenarios here. The first is, what do other people do to you? The second is, what do your actions do to your own emotions? Let's start by talking about what other people do to you. They say that this is going to lead to people like not engaging with you because, you know, it's better to get love from other people that you asked for than love that you didn't ask for. Robert doesn't respond to the really crucial argument, though, that Gaurov gives you, which is that when you're expecting love from someone else, it matters a lot more than when you are not expecting love from someone else. So if I ask Robert for a lecture on how to win debate rounds, and he says, here's a lecture on how to win debate rounds, that's cool. He did what I asked for. But if Robert out of the blue says, hey, Ryan, I know you have nightmares about octafinals, let me help you out in winning debate rounds, the impact there is much greater. So do the weighing. Realistically, the magnitude of impact is much greater, because if you ask for something and get it back, it matters much more than when someone leaves a present on your doorstep that you weren't expecting. So the weighing here is pretty intuitive. People derive more utility under our side. Secondly, they drop our argument about reciprocity. This is really important. When you help other people out in their darkest moments of their life, they respond by helping you out when you're not responding to them. So it's not just that other people might be depressed. It's what happens when you're depressed. What happens when you're suffering from the COVID pandemic? Under our side, when you aren't reaching out, other people do. So we outweigh them not just in terms of like this vague notion of friendship. We outweigh them on the issue of magnitude and protecting your own life. But finally, I want to talk about how other actions affect you. Crucially, we tell you out of PMC, when you reach out to someone, even if they turn you away, you feel good about yourself. You feel like a good friend because you felt like you were doing something that wasn't specifically necessary. You're going above and beyond. You're doing something that makes you feel good and helping benefit the world. So we outweigh them here on magnitude as well. Even if they turn you away, even if they say this is annoying and badgering, the end impact for you is still good, because worst case is on their side of the house, they never respond. On our side of the house, they say, F off. On our side of the house, at least the impact is you feel good about yourself. For all these reasons, I'm exceptionally proud to propose.
Okay, so we have a decision, so I just want to make sure that all of the judges and all of the debaters are here. It looks like, is Ryan here? Oh, yes, right there. Okay.
Is Jack here?
Yeah, I'm here. I can turn my camera on.
Perfect.
Okay, so I think I speak for everybody when I say that that was a great round, very fun, very interesting to watch. So with that being said, the decision was a 5-0 for the government team. So we're just going to go around and say very quickly why we voted Gov. I can just start since I'm already speaking. So for me, what this round really came down to was just weighing. I don't really think that people persuaded me very much with their responses. I think there were a lot of concessions, which is fine. I think it came down more to weighing for me. And I'll explain what I mean by that, which is that I think Gov reasonably convinces me that people who are depressed or suicidal, will not seek out love in the worst moments of their lives, and that in those moments, the love is going to be unsought, and that is the most important thing to give. And I also think that Op reasonably convinces me that it may be annoying for you to keep badgering somebody if they clearly don't want to be loved. But then I think that Gov does very persuasive weighing for me that it's much more important to help somebody who's suicidal or severely depressed than it is to be seen as somebody who isn't annoying. And so then from that decision, I think all of the other impacts flow, right? If you're doing the most important work, then you're going to have the better reputation, and you're going to receive all of those different benefits if you're helping the people who need it most. So that was my decision. We can just go in a random order. Yeah, Nan, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can. I thought this was a terrific round. I think it speaks to how good both teams are, that you both did a fantastic job both rebutting your opponents and rebuilding your own case. And that's why it ended up, I think, being so close for me and coming down to impacts for me as well. On the other side of my flow, I essentially have something that looks a bit like a Punnett square that helped me analyze, what does government give me on giving and receiving, and what does op give me on giving and receiving? And I agree with Ariel that even if I buy everything both teams say, when it comes down to the weighing that I get in the final speech from the prime minister is this point about how, they outweigh on magnitude, and I think I do buy that. However, I did want to point out that I was a little surprised that op did not extend their point about harassment further. Not to be macabre, but I expected this round to move into the realm of, discussing things like sexual harassment, because, that is something, when I think of love unsought, I think of maybe somebody who's stalking somebody, or, I think you could have brought those up and it would have lended you stronger impacts to say, actually, this world in which we have, people thinking love unsought is a terrific thing that gives them credibility to say stalk somebody who does not want them, or repeatedly ask somebody out. I think you almost shied away from that, and it would have given you the real upper hand in terms of magnitude. But that is all I would say. I think this point about love at first sight was not a new point. However, I did think what was a new point was this idea that being given love when you are depressed could save your life. I hear it in the final speech from the PM, and I didn't hear it earlier, but op did not call it, so it went. That's all I've got.
All right, if no one else is going, I'll step in. So very, very good round. I thought everyone did really, really well. For me, I think it came down to a few things. One, I thought one of the biggest kind of points right from the beginning was we kind of, with very little opposition, just accepted. And I think Nan was just saying that this was one of the biggest points on her flow too, that we just kind of accepted that this point that if you're someone who needs help the most, you wouldn't reach out. And I kind of never fully bought that myself. I always thought people who need help more could end up reaching out. So that's something I thought could have seen a lot more clash. To me, though, the biggest thing ended up just being in a matter of voter issues. I did end up, I think, buying actually the point from the opposition side that they would end up that love unsought, the way it was portrayed in this debate, would end up being better for the person receiving the love than love sought. But to me, I think Ryan did a really, really good job in his last speech of establishing the second voter issue of not just what happens to the person receiving the love, but to the person giving the love, and making those strong points about reputation, about being known as like a good person with a strong moral character. And I think it was that second voter issue that I think was what ended up, I think, swinging my ballot. I kind of ended up having those kind of two main voter issues, each in my book going one to either side. But I thought the point of reputation was a lot stronger on the government side, whereas the point of which side benefits was a lot more balanced out. That's mostly due to all the clash on it.
Sure. Okay, I can go. So yeah, of course, I thought this was an excellent round. I personally will say I think Ryan's final speech is possibly the best I've seen, but no need for that praise. So I think I agree with a lot of what other people have said. I think that what really swung it for me was the topic of, whether or not these people who are depressed, who are just generally down, are seeking love. And I think Ryan does a great job of outlining in the PMC like three really clear-cut reasons for why we should believe that. I think op never really matches that level of warranting in any of like the rest of their speeches. Like I think they generally just try to rebut it by making claims, but we never really get anywhere near that level of warranting. I think because of that, Gov really flows through on like Gov really gains like a large share of that impact, and I think that impact was by far the biggest in this round for me. I do really appreciate Nan's point about harassment and like that kind of unsought love, and I think that's a pool of really important impact that really wasn't explored at all by op, and I think that really could have been op's best path of victory. I think the other points about public image weren't nearly as significant. And I think regardless, they didn't really flow strongly to either side for me. And then I guess my final point would just be about like the definition of love itself. I thought a lot of the things in this round that were used as examples, I think there's a lot of room to question whether that like classifies as love. And I'm not really sure, like reaching out during COVID, you have that colloquial idea of love, like, oh, like show some love to these people or whatever. Like, sure, that's like one way of interpreting love. But I think what I had foreseen was much more so like, as Gov said, like a much higher bar for love. I think like things like, reaching out during COVID, I could see it being the case, but I was just surprised there wasn't any clash at all about that. And I would have been very interested in seeing like which side that would have helped if, that definition was explored more. But yeah, with all that being said, just basically that main clash about which side gained the most impact about depressed and suicidal people really won Gov debate for me.
Yeah, I'll just run through my RFD quickly. Okay, so the first thing that I was thinking about was the characterization of the motion. So I was buying Op's claim about this, but by like Ryan's final speech, there were two reasons why Gov won on this. Like as Ryan mentioned, this is not the intention of the motion, that he was able to show that one is not perfect. So like in that type of comparative analysis, he was not necessarily saying that the type of love that opposition was proposing is bad. He was just saying that it's not as perfect as like the one that government was accepting. All right, and then the second part of that, which I'll get into more later, was about the definition of seeking. So in Ryan's first speech, he defined seeking as asking, right? So this works for Gov, right? If you accept this definition throughout the whole round, then Gov does win because that negates so many of opposition's arguments against it. So I'll get into more later how like that went for me. So I did buy Gov's first contention because of this, because I was like still operating underneath that definition. All right, and then the second thing I voted on was the idea of love you receive. So in the world of government, you are receiving love even when you're not asking for it. That was Ryan's like self-interest voter. So I thought that that was a really strong voter, and like because of the magnitude of the benefit from that, like I thought that they won on that point. And then I was like torn on the argument about like reputation like seeming annoying, but like because I buy Gov's first argument that like all of the benefits that Gov gives you outweighs the harms that opposition proposes, and then the whole mental health response from Op was a wash. Okay, so here's the thing. I was really, really close, like between, like I'm sure everybody, like every judge has said that it was incredibly close. The reason why it was close for me was because of the definition. So just looking at my flow, for me, it seems as if like Ops, like both of Ops contentions end up flowing through, but they end up being outweighed if we do operate underneath the original definition that was given. So Gov needed to be more explicit in saying that, like saying in the final speech, like or like in all of the speeches, that we defined seeking as asking. So I was very close to voting for Op on this because you didn't say that. And I was like, I don't want to do this because I know it was your definition, but you didn't say it explicitly enough. But I think that because government did not end up switching or anything, because government continued to maintain their definition in the way that they gave examples and the way that they formed their arguments, that's why I allowed the definition to stand throughout. But I wish that Gov was more clear in saying, like, looking at the definition itself that was accepted, almost all of the opposing arguments end up falling in this round. So it was definitely very close, but because of that definition issue and Ryan's impact calculus, it ended up going for Gov.
Thank you guys for such a good round. It's always good to be able to see some like really good debate. It makes it more fun being a judge.
Thanks for judging. Thanks for a great round, guys.
Phenomenal round.
Great round, everybody.
Thank you.